It is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That is Carl Canedy with The Rods, and he's got a new CD out that he's kind of promoting. Well, he should promote it. It's his own project. The name of the CD is called HEADBANGER, and the name of the tune there is something you can find on YouTube if you want to check out his music. That is called The Cult of the Poison Mind, and for the first time on the Classic Metal Show, legendary drummer Carl Canedy. Welcome to the Classic Metal Show there, Carl.
Thank you very much. Happy to be on.
Yeah, man. Well, we've had the Rods on the show over the years, but I don't think we've ever had you on the show. And you're obviously out there, promoting your solo project. I guess you would call this a solo project, even though you've got numerous people kind of helping you out with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and by the way, it's long overdue, so I'm glad I'm on the show now. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome anytime.
So yes, it's a solo album. The criteria for the album was that I had written 100% of the songs, that I owned 100% of the songs, and that I, recorded, produced it. So that was kind of the criteria. They were all my songs, and and I owned everything. So
right.
But yes, I had a lot of great help on this album. I mean, John Hahn, Mike Varney, Discovery, a Leviathan artist. I mean, a phenomenal guitarist. I played drums on John Hahn's first album, and some of the other guests on the album as well. People I've worked with.
Sure. Well, I got to ask you, Carl, and you kind of stressed something there that kind of brought a question to mind about that you wrote 100% of the songs and you own 100% of the songs. Granted, the music business is such a fickle thing these days. It's not like it was in the 70s and the 80s when things were, very profitable for artists. And now that everything is digital and everybody's downloading and whatnot, how big of a part do music royalties play for an artist such as yourself? When and this is no slight against you. It's just fact of the matter. You're not going to be selling out, say, arenas.
Wow, you're going to drop that bomb on me? What? No, I'm kidding. No, it's exactly right. And when I do interviews, I get asked a lot of times, and I get asked this by young artists sometimes. Isn't it like, how do you feel about this versus when you were signed to a major label versus now when you can do it on your own? And isn't it better now? And I'm like, it's a little bit of both. And yes, it's easy to do your own project. It's easy to release it. But there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of traffic. If you go to McDonald's and you order some fries, and you say, hey, you want my CD? And they'll say, sure. And you want to hear mine? And they'll hand you theirs. Everybody seems to have a project out. So it's hard to rise above that. And, of course, with that being said, as you were pointing out, that a lot of music fans download. They just download. And I think for major artists, it's not really as big an issue because they have income streams. They have touring, merchandise, and so on, as well as their downloads and their album sales. But for indie artists, it hurts more. So when the fans support you and they buy your CDs, they do downloads, and they pay for your music, it's a big help. By the same token, for me, I've come to look at it as I just want the fans to have the music. At this point in my career, it's not that we don't all want music, and I would love to go out and play with the artists who performed on Canedy and on HEADBANGER. I would love to go and play an arena. I'd love to play big theaters, but reality is it's just not going to happen. But I just want the fans. I love meeting the fans when we play gigs, and I really want the fans to have the music. And if that means they download it free, then so be it. I'm good with that.
Right. Well, the greatest thing that independent artists could hope for, perhaps, is that somewhere down the road that some a movie soundtrack selects your song to be a part of the movie. Now that would be good, right?
That would be great. There's an income stream from that, absolutely. And, I think you're just looking for income streams now as an indie artist. It used to be that you would have record royalties, the sales of your album would be something that would hopefully keep you going in the record support. You would have tour support from the label and so on. But and now you look for income streams wherever you can. You look for downloads, you sell CDs at gigs, you sell merchandise and whatever. I mean, it's just, you now have to be diversified and be creative with your packaging as well.
Sure. Well, speaking of, having CDs at gigs and whatnot, when I'm always curious as to when, artists such as yourself get their friends involved in helping them with their project, and, you've got a nice list of people here that are involved. It kind of makes it difficult for you to go out and play it live if that was on your agenda. Because if you want to take those people with you or include a couple of those people, it's kind of hard with the scheduling and whatnot. And maybe you might get to play a one-off show if all the stars align correctly. But is this something that you intend on performing live somewhere, or is this just satisfaction for a studio project?
That's an interesting question. I actually did not think past doing a solo album. I mean, honestly, it was something that is so long overdue for me, having been a writer, arranger, producer. I don't know why I waited till, this long in my career before I did my own project. I probably produced 35 albums, for other artists. But the thought of doing something live, I just didn't think past doing the album. It's been brought up by a couple of people involved in the project that they've actually discussed it. So maybe there could be a one-off at some point, or maybe a few dates, depending on scheduling. So I would say that it's a long shot, but it is a possibility now. I mean, it's being discussed. So
right.
We'll see if we can bring it to fruition.
Sure, absolutely. Now, you've gotten involved with Mark Tornillo, who has really made a strong comeback by being selected as the current singer of the band Accept, and he's just done a phenomenal job on their last 3 releases. I mean, I got to be honest with you, the only way that I knew of a Mark Tornillo was from TT Quick, obviously, and
right.
So many people here on the Classic Metal Show were so skeptical that before the first Mark Tornillo fronted Accept record came out, that, it can't be any good without Udo, and he came out and hit 3 albums right out of the park. Now, what's your relationship with Mark? Is this somebody that you've known for a long time over the years, and have you done work with him before? Well,
first let me say that it was not a surprise to me that Mark was going to hit it out of the park, and that for all the naysayers and all the people who felt that Accept was doing him a favor, I felt that it was really the opposite, that they needed Mark and that Mark was their salvation. And that's taking nothing away from the guys in Accept, but Mark was the guy who could make that happen for them, and he has. But I produced the first TT Quick EP. So I worked with Mark way back when, and blew me away back then. Just always loved his voice, and that's why I reached out to him for my album. And Mark actually came to my studio twice, 2 different days, and worked his ass off. And I mean, he is just the real deal. He's a great singer, got brilliant ideas, and it's no wonder that those 3 albums have done as well as they've done, because he's just a super talented guy, and he's also a really hard worker. You can see it from the stage. He loves what he does. He brings that energy to it, and he can just sing all night. I mean, he's just got a powerful, powerful voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another notable guy that you're working with on this CD is Chris Caffrey. Of course, a lot of people know Chris from Sabotage, and of course, he's been a very integral part of the TSO brand, which has just blown up over the last 20 years. With that,
what a phenomenon that is.
Yeah. So,
and Chris, not only is he phenomenal in Trans-Siberian Orchestra, but the guy could have his own talk show. I mean, he MCs the shows for the East Coast version of that, and he is just a phenomenal MC. I don't know if you've caught the shows, but he is just a great MC.
Yeah.
So,
well, we've had.
But Chris,
go ahead.
Chris blew me away. Sorry, Chris blew me away. I mean, with his solos, it was exactly, what was needed, and just blew me away with the parts. I mean, just very generous and just did a great job.
Sure, absolutely. Now you've included a song on this CD, if I understand this correctly, that features Dio. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Obviously before Ronnie passed away, he sang 2 songs. He came to David's studio in Cortland, and he sang 2 songs. He sang the song I wrote called The Code, which is on the CD, and he sang a song that ultimately wound up on David's solo album, Metal Will Never Die, which I think is a great track. Actually, I'm surprised it hasn't been more widely recognized. But I felt that with my solo album, I included this as an afterthought, but I included it as a bonus track simply because I felt that Ronnie, I had known David, Ronnie, the guys at Elf, Gary Driscoll. Gary used to come and see a band I was in. He would come and sit and watch us play, when Elf wasn't on tour. And, just known those guys since I was 19 years old. And at one point, we actually re-rehearsed in the garage. They rehearsed in the house. So those guys were part of my DNA, even seeing them prior to that when they used to play high school dances. And Elf would come out, and they all had hair down to their ass. And, these high school dances, people would actually dance. But when Elf played, everybody was sitting on the floor. It was just a concert, and nobody moved, and they just watched because the band was incredible.
Sure.
So for me, Ronnie having sung a song that I'd written was the highlight of my career. I mean, as a musician, as a songwriter, and I just felt that leaving it off the album really didn't represent, because I wanted this album to represent my songwriting. I mean, I think anybody who knows me knows that I can play drums. So the point of the album was really more of a focus on my songs and my production. And so having it on, and so I redid guitars and bass on it because I wanted to just move it more in a direction where I had done on the demo in terms of that. And, my original demo. And that's how it came to be. I just wanted it to kind of be on there to just represent my songwriting and the fact that it was really a pinnacle for me. I mean, I don't think anything would top having Ronnie sing my song, and the experience of watching the master at work, because I produced a lot of musicians and great musicians and been in the studio with these guys and had those experience of watching somebody super talented work. But my experience with Ronnie was one that he was so respectful of my melodies, so respectful of that, and yet what he brought, he elevated it so far, and he did everything. Everything was one take with him. Let's try this idea, but everything was a take. Just phenomenal artist. So it was really just so much respect for that. What a respectful guy he was. So for me, it was just important to include it as a bonus track on my CD.
Sure, absolutely. It's quite an honor. Well, let me ask you something, Carl. You've mentioned, your list of credentials, obviously drumming, writing, producing, and somebody who does production or is a producer. How do you become a producer? I mean, what sets a good producer apart from a guy who just likes to fiddle around with a board?
Well, I don't know. I think everybody kind of comes to being a producer. I don't know that anyone necessarily sets out to become a producer. I mean, I don't know that there's a producer school per se. I know you can go to a lot of recording studios and so on, and I'm sure you can be trained. But, I mean, for me, it came about by I'd always been interested in recording. So early on, I was always buying tape recorders and overdubbing things and reversing tapes and just constantly experimenting with sounds and ideas. And, of course, I started playing guitar and piano around the same time I started playing drums. So I've been playing guitar, and I was always into arrangements. But when it first came time to record the first album, which was a band called Halakis, which is actually being re-released right now. It's just about to launch. We didn't have any money. It was basically about a poverty situation. Well, we really need a producer, but we don't have any money. We barely have money to buy studio time. So it's a case of, in that album, for example, each of us, I had 3 songs. I produced my 3 songs. When it came time for the Rods to record, a lot of times David and I wrote the material, and we would do the basic tracks, and David would be singing, and, you know, I would kind of coach him. We would discuss arrangements, and he would help me, and we both got into producing just simply because we didn't have money for a producer. So, and from there, it just branched out, and someone said one day, why don't you start doing this for other bands? You know, you seem to love it. And so I started doing demos for bands, and pretty soon I started recording albums for bands, and it was just a case of really, it started from having no money and, you know, mother being, you know.
Well, do you think that, you know, say being a good producer, do you think that you need to have a certain ear for detail or have a lot of ideas? I mean, let me give you an example. I'm sure
yes, I would say that.
Yeah, because as in any musician, oftentimes a lot of musicians have influences. You know, being a drummer, you might say that John Bonham is an influence, or Carmine Appice, or somebody like that. But from a
and I studied with Carmine, so he's absolutely an influence.
Sure,
Carmine and Tony Williams. I studied with both of those guys, and of course they're huge influences. So yes,
right. Well, then, you know, being a producer, you might have a favorite and a producer. There might be like a Ted Templeman or a Beau Hill or a, you know, Alan Niven or somebody like that. What sets those guys apart in your mind? What sets, say, a Ted Templeman apart from a Michael Wagner?
Well, I think speaking to that, I think that in those two, Michael Wagner has a certain sound that he gets that some producers, you can't really always tell that it's them. It's the same producer, because they're very versatile and they really dial in what the artist is going for, and they really don't always put their personal stamp on it. Other producers, like a Michael Wagner, who engineers as well, Michael Wagner puts a lot of his, you know, there's a definite stamp, a signature sound. But I think it helps to know music. I think that helps a lot. I think for arrangements, to have ideas. But the longer I produced, the more I realized, like, I was always concerned with making sure the band was tight, there was an energy flow, that we were capturing what the essence of that band was going for, especially because I was dealing with a lot of metal bands that were just super high energy, and we weren't in the digital age. We were still analog when we first started doing that, and there was no cut and paste. When you hear those recordings, those guys went for it, and they played it. There's nobody tweaked, nobody went back and beat doctored anything. So I think it's looking at that. I think also as a producer, you need to know, I don't need to add anything. I think you have to get to a point where you recognize that it's really good and it's ready. It's where it needs to be, and just to add something to it would be detracting. So I think you have to look at that. So I think you have to kind of look at the big picture. Does the song need something? Does the song, sometimes you can make a suggestion. Sometimes I'll say, let's try this riff, let's change the key here, let's try this arrangement. And other times I'll ask the artist, I'll say, you know, I think this melody, for example, you know, I think the lyrics are great, but the melody really needs to develop more. You know, think about it, see what you come back with. So sometimes you kind of send them off and ask them to kind of do the work themselves without giving them too much input, so that you're not coloring their work with your input, like you said about influences. You know, maybe I'm saying, you know, come back and approach that. Maybe the track needs a different groove. But instead of saying, come back and play it like John Bonham, so, you know, I think maybe if you think about this beat and the groove here, maybe develop it a little more, send them off to figure out where they want to go with it. So I think there's so many aspects to producing, and even to the point of some of those aspects being just to know when to just not have a hands-on, just to let it go. It's good, and let's roll with it. Let's capture that energy of the band right now.
Right. Well, since you have produced, and this is something that, you know, I'm getting away from your record, but this is a fascinating part of music for me. We often discuss here on the Classic Metal Show how often artists or producers or bands will put an effect on the vocals. We call it the bullhorn effect. It sounds like they're, singing through a filter. It kind of has that 90s grunge sound where everybody was doing that bullhorn. We hate it so much here on the Classic Metal Show because everybody seems to do it way too much that we've just dubbed it the fucky effect.
Nice.
So what is your thoughts on that effect that everybody puts that bullhorn effect on the vocals, and it's just so prevalent in today's music. It just takes away from everything. It sounds like shit to us. We hate it.
Well, I have 2 songs on the album that when I write a song and when I bring it to the Roz or bring it whatever, I play everything myself. I sing it. I play everything myself. So I included 2 of those of my I call them my 30-minute demos because when I'm writing, I just throw them down quickly and they suck, and I know they suck. So no airs of tension. Think it's going to be good. I just put them down. But when it comes to my voice, I would just add that shit all over my voice because my voice sucks so badly. So. That's why I would add it. But I think there's a place for every effect. It just depends. If it's just a case of just, it's like getting hit in the head with a hammer. If somebody taps you in the head with a hammer, it's like, whoa. But somebody after 20 hits with a hammer, it's like you're so, you're numb. You don't feel anything anymore. So It's kind of like overkill on those things. I think in the right spot, the right place, if there's a section that breaks down and maybe everything kind of dries up and is tiny. But in general, for me, vocals, I really like now. I like fat, dry vocals, and I like the delay to come after the vocal so that your vocal is dry. It's in your face. You hear all the character of the singer, and then the delay is around that, not in the way of the vocal. So that's how I approach it. There was a time when it seemed like I would just want to put reverb on everything. I just drown everything in reverb.
Right.
And, it's like the first day with the reverb unit.
Sure.
And, so you get away from that. But you guys are hysterical because you kind of hit it on the head there.
Nice. Well, let's get back to your release here called Headbanger. Is there anything specific about this? I know we talked about about the participation of various artists in there. Is there any specific thing about this release that stands out for you, or that you're most proud of, that you want to kind of point out to the fans?
There's so many things. There's so many things, and I think Joe Camo, the artists who worked on this album, they busted their ass for me. So to say I'm grateful and humbled is, it's cliched. I mean, but honestly, these guys really, they went, they gave me 100%, and I can't thank them enough. But Joe Camo did a great job. Mark, of course, phenomenal job. Just so many. John Hahn was selfless. I mean, he handled the guitars throughout the whole project, and it was, a daunting. He followed he took my guitarist and then elevated my parts, but very respectfully, and kept the essence and all my parts intact, but then, played them the way, elevated them to a point where I could never play them that well on guitar, even approach that. So they're just, Gary Chesick was my utility guy. He always came in whenever I needed anything. He's a guitarist, but he played bass on several tracks on this album. Even Link Bloomfield from the Colossus, the first album I ever did, Link helped contribute. So many people who, Dave Porter from 805. So everybody was great. I think it was really sweet that Rosane Galvo from Brazil, she played a bass track for me on Madman, and that was a riot because they really don't speak English that well, but I loved her bass playing. She played with us in Brazil last year, and we all got to be friends. So for her going into the studio in Brazil and doing a bass track, and the whole experience of that was it was great. She did a phenomenal job. But it was really interesting that, in this day and age with the technology, you can just, send somebody tracks and they can play them in Brazil, and then you wind up getting your tracks back and load them into your session, and all done.
Absolutely.
So.
Excellent.
But it was, I think, the biggest thing that I came away from this project, and I had a rehearsal today with the Rods, and David and I, Gary wasn't able to make it, so it was just the two of us. So we were kind of doing a White Stripes rehearsal for our show in Brooklyn coming up on March 13th. And we're talking about it. I said, you know, how many albums? I mean, the Rods have done so many albums. I produced so many albums, but I've never done a solo album. And what was unique and interesting to me was nobody knew what the project was going to be like until it was done. And sometimes I found myself kind of floundering a little bit because I didn't really know like anyone to bounce ideas off. You know, it was like, here, this is my project, and I can go any direction I like, but I just didn't get that feedback that I was used to getting. I know that you know, Rob Reiner from Anvil, the song "My Life, My Way." I kept telling him every day, I'm playing the drum track, Rob, and he gave me the big pep talk about, you know, you have to just not think about it. You're overthinking it. And then I went and sat down at the drums and recorded after that, and I knocked out the track.
Nice.
But I just didn't have a producer. I didn't have the input from other artists. I also didn't, when you're producing somebody else, you see their direction. And so now you kind of guide that and you protect it. And with my own project, I just didn't have that. So I had to go, hey, wait a minute, no one's kind of guiding the ship here. I have to figure out where I want to go with it.
Right.
So that was interesting. New perspective for me, you know, as a producer and a writer.
Right. Excellent. Well, there's always the fucky effect you can throw on there anytime you like.
No, believe me, I'm headed to the studio soon, and I'm going to just add that on everything. I actually think it would be a great idea to just take some albums and just take the whole album and just run the whole thing through that.
Yeah, that'll sell like none. All right, Carl. Well, we appreciate you taking some time. So where can people find this? Where can people find HEADBANGER?
You can find it, and there's a store on the Rods website, therods.com. And CD Baby is another outlet, and of course iTunes, Amazon. It's out there. So,
all right, excellent. And as you said, you don't really have any ideas about performing the songs from this. Is that anything that you could introduce into a Rod set, or how's your bandmates feel about doing a solo song? From one of the individuals in the band.
Yeah, no one has a problem with that. We do songs from David's solo album, and we actually do a couple songs from this album as well. So songs will be out there as well. So people come to see the Rods, they might hear a couple of songs from Canedy.
Absolutely.
From HEADBANGER.
All right, Carl. Well, again, we appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk about the new release called HEADBANGER. Go out there to all your digital media sites and go pick the thing up, and go ahead and buy a song or two and support a guy who works hard for his money. So anyway, Carl, before I let you go here, I need to ask you the traditional classic metal show question. We've got about 300 answers to this question over the years. So here's your opportunity. How has Lemmy from Motorhead influenced your career?
Lemmy has influenced my career over the years from playing a show with Motorhead, and Lemmy at the end of the show, who's the sweetest, most generous guy, and as hardcore a rocker as you could ever find. A guy who just oozes metal and heavy. But I learned that after a show, I do not put my arm around fans. I do not, especially if they're shorter than I am, because after our show with Lemmy, we were hanging out, and Lemmy was offering me beer. He was just the nicest guy, but he's tall, and people wanted to take pictures. So he put his arm around me, and he was just sweaty as all hell. And I realized I'm never going to do that to anybody. And it was Lemmy, and I love Lemmy, so I didn't say anything, but the armpit sweat on me was, something I wasn't loving, even though I love Lemmy. So from that, I decided I would never do that to anyone else after a show and put my sweaty armpit on their shoulder.
Very nice. All right, Carl. As a tradition here on the Classic Metal Show, we let the artist always pick a closing song from the interview. So what should we play, and tell us a quick story about it?
Let's see. I would say My Life, My Way features Mark Tornillo on vocals. It features John Hahn, and Chris Caffrey is on this as well. Chris Caffrey and John Hahn trade guitar solos. And it was a song that I wrote about my best friend who died from cancer about 4 years ago. And he told me about a tattoo, and before he died, and he talked about it, but he never told me what it was. And interestingly enough, they were telling me about his last moments, and that when his arm turned out, he said it was kind of the way he lives, and the tattoo was my life, my way. And so it was a strong impact for me hearing the story, because I was so sad and losing my best friend. And so that's how I wrote the song. So for me, it was an emotional song, an important song to me, but the guys they kill it. Mark's vocal kills on that song. So that would be my choice.
Excellent. All right, well, go pick it up today. Canedy with Headbanger, and here it is, My Life, My Way, exclusively here on your Classic Metal Show.